Betty, it's Wanda Baader here from Strategize Your Success, and today with my co-host Cynthia Bazin from Smart Chick, we are Hot Tips for Biz, bringing top experts in the business community to you every week. Today we actually have two great people again to share with you, and I'm going to have Cynthia introduce them.
Hi everyone, Cynthia Bazin. Great for you to be here watching live or watching the replay. I am so thrilled to have our two guests today. First, I want to introduce and just put up on the camera Chantel Beshavaz as our guest host today, and our expert for today is LaRae from LaRaeQuai.com. She is a mental toughness expert. So I want to get right to LaRae because it's a 30-minute show and it goes by very quickly. Welcome, LaRae, to the show.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So, LaRae, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background on how you got into your business?
Absolutely. I was born and raised on a cattle ranch in Wyoming, and I knew right away I didn't want to have to work that hard the rest of my life because cattle ranchers do work. So I graduated from college, got a degree, and I was working on my master's when the FBI came on campus and interviewed. And I thought, why not? And I interviewed, and 6 months later, I was at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. So I was an FBI agent for 24 years, working counterintelligence and espionage. And I came to a point where I was eligible to retire. I didn't really have to, but I just knew that there was more that I wanted to do, and I've always wanted to write. So I retired and I started my blog and have written 2 books, and now working at directing the Mental Toughness Center and putting together training programs and writing books on what mental toughness is all about.
LaRae, you and I have known each other for a long time, so I'm so thrilled to have you here today. Everyone, this is Hot Tips for Biz, and we've got the amazing LaRae Quai. She is one of the smartest women that I know, so I'm so excited for her to share tips today. LaRae, why don't we jump right into it, because we have a lot for you to share today. So let's just do, kind of a basic question, because your expertise is in mental toughness. What is mental toughness, and why do we need that?
That's a great question, Cindy. I look and I define a mental toughness as believing that we can prevail in our circumstances rather than believing our circumstances will change. And because we all get hit by tough times and the unexpected, and there's no way to avoid that. So mental toughness is something that you can learn. It's not something you're born with. And I look at it as well as just being able to control your emotions, your thoughts, and your behavior in ways that will set you up for success.
Great. Wanda, have you ever needed mental toughness in your life? I'm sure. We all do.
Yeah, it's like we all have our hills that we have to climb, and then we have our mountains.
Chantel, do you have any thoughts about mental toughness? You want to just say hello to LaRae? What are your thoughts on having LaRae on the show today?
Hi, LaRae. Yes, no, definitely we all need mental toughness. We all need to be resilient. As you guys are aware of having internet connection, so I had to put on my toughness and find another source from internet today. But no, we all need to learn that to be able to cope and to be better in life.
So, Chantel, do you have a question for LaRae?
I do. LaRae, if we want to become more mental tough, what areas do we have to look at?
Thank you, Chantel. A great question. I am working actually in trying to codify what mental toughness is, because, it's kind of like a chicken soup. You just put a lot of things into it. A lot of people will say it's this and this and this, but I will start with the first and most important criteria or component of mental toughness is self-awareness, emotional awareness, emotional intelligence. It's being able to understand who you are well enough that you can persevere and keep going when things in your job are not perfect. I mean, when we're 20 years old, we're out of the chute really fast, but after a few years, if we're not really passionate about what we're doing, and if we haven't identified the why we're doing it, then we don't have what it takes to keep going when adversity does hit us. So that's the first thing.
I just throw a thought in there. It's so true, though, is that once you really know who you are, you know what I mean? It becomes so much more. It becomes much easier to be resilient. At least in my mind. What are your thoughts, Wanda? I mean, I know I'm a lot different than I was 25 years ago. I'm much more aware now.
Absolutely. The old saying, if I only knew now, or knew then what I know now, life might have been a little different also. Mm-hmm. But I guess that's what we have to experience, is the painful process of growing up. I'm going through this with my 18-year-old right now. He just graduated from high school, and he's trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life. It's like, do I go to college? If I go to college, what do I take? What do I want to be? And we don't have that answer always when we're younger.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so number one, self-awareness. That's the first key. Why don't you, what's your next part, LaRae?
Well, we've talked about it, but the second rule of mental toughness is resilience. Because if you are not resilient, you're not going to be able to bounce through or bounce back from adversity. And really, when you're talking about resilience, you're talking about the ability to walk into a discomfort zone, move out of what you're comfortable in, and move into something at which you are no longer an expert. You are the student. You're a constant learner. And really, when you're a learner, you're constantly training yourself. You come up against things of which you don't know that much about, and you learn. And when you do that, and you keep moving ahead, that's how you build confidence. I mean, confidence is not something that comes from just reading books and hoping that you'll eventually acquire it. Confidence comes from setting a goal for yourself, moving through something, and realizing, yes, you can do it, and you can do it very well. That is resilience.
So I guess an initial question, and I don't want to jump ahead because you've got so much to share. So many people feel very beaten down. You know what I mean? They've gone through so much, and sometimes, you know what? I just don't have it in me. You know what I mean? They're having troubles in their business or their personal life. They seem like they keep getting beaten down. Any tips? And again, I don't want to jump ahead, but for someone who's just life has been just kicking them left and right, it can get better, right?
Well,
what do you recommend?
Absolutely, Cindy. And so while self-awareness and resilience are important, the third area is willpower. And when you talk about willpower, it addresses some of the very things you're talking about, which is just the determination and the perseverance to keep going. And that, again, is why I start off with self-awareness, because if you're not really pursuing something that has meaning and value for you, you're not going to keep going when times get tough. You're not going to know what to do. So starting there, and everybody comes to a point at which they need to break through in some way. They need to take it to the next level, or they need to break through an adversity or roadblock that's ahead of them. So willpower is incredibly important.
How many different steps do you have, LaRae? Because I definitely want the panel to get involved, to ask you some questions. Maybe it would be good for you to run through them all, and then we'll start a discussion off of that.
That sounds perfect, because there's two more.
Okay, perfect.
And the fourth one is mindset. And that is just having an understanding that, the world is not broken down into winners and losers. It's broken down into learners and non-learners. A lot of people feel that they have a fixed mindset. They were either born intelligent or attractive or talented. But if you have a growth mindset, you realize you can learn to be more attractive, intelligent, and talented. And then the fifth component of mental toughness is really the rule of positivity. And that is being a positive thinker. Different than optimism. Optimism believes that things will change for the best. Just stick with it. Things will change. A positive thinker, on the other hand, isn't looking for their circumstances to change. They are looking to prevail within their circumstances. So those are the 5: self-aware, resilience, willpower, mindset, and positivity.
Chantel, any thoughts about what LaRae has said or a question related to those different characteristics of mental toughness?
Definitely agree with everything LaRae has said. The word that comes to my mind when I hear LaRae speak is grit. So, like, for me, that defines what grit is. You know, being able to take your situation and make it better, and know that you can, and that no matter what happens, you can get through this. So it's just the perseverance, and it's something I try to teach my daughter too, is that, you know, when things go wrong, they don't have to stay wrong. You can work at it and learn from whatever's happening to you and make it better.
Thank you, Chantel. Wanda, how about yourself? Do you have any thoughts or questions to LaRae regarding this?
Yeah, I've been taking some notes because you have such great information here. Is how do you, let's say that we have a client who needs a shot of positivity. You know, maybe they're kind of hitting the gravel instead of attacking the big rocks in life. They're just kind of lost in that gravel, and you need to bring them up and help them to see the other side of things. How can we, as coaches and consultants, help our clients to get there?
That's a great question, Wanda. But to begin with, our brain is wired to be negative. And that, it comes from the caveman days. Our limbic brain is survival driven. I mean, we, for centuries, went out to get lunch, not be lunch. And so threats and things that we don't understand are something we avoid because it's that survival-driven part of our brain. So the first thing I would recommend for you and your clients is to alert people that just because they're seeing everything negative right now is not an anomaly. It's probably the most realistic reaction they could have. But they don't have to stay there because this is not the caveman days. And just because something is new or different doesn't mean it's a threat to your survival. So the next step would be, and this is based in neuroscience. This is not just LaRae Kwai telling you that this is how to overcome this, but scientists and neuroscientists have determined that for every one negative thought you have, you need to counter it with 5 positive thoughts. And you really have to sometimes hunt the good stuff. And that's what I call it, hunting the good stuff. Because that is not going to be what comes to your mind naturally. It's going to be just the opposite.
Thank you. That's great information. But it's interesting that it takes 5 positives to negate the 1 negative.
Absolutely. And for a while, a few years, the ratio used to be 3-to-1. But as they've studied more and more about the pervasive nature of that survival brain, it's now 5. And, you know, I will tell a quick story. General Stockdale, James Stockdale, when he was imprisoned, he was asked, why did your group survive and the others didn't? And he said, you know, the optimists just died of a broken heart because they kept thinking their circumstances were going to change. And he said, we knew we were in prison, we were missing legs, arms, other parts of their body. They were tortured several times during this 7-year imprisonment, but each day they were grateful for what they did have. And when you have that attitude of gratitude, which is also an important component of this positivity mindset, then you can start looking, you start becoming more aware of the good things in life instead of just what isn't going your way. So being curious and being grateful are 2 very important tools if you want to develop a positive mindset.
LaRae, I have to ask you this. I know I've never asked you this before, but you grew up on a ranch. You go into the FBI. Were you always mentally tough coming from the ranch, or was this something that you really had to work at? Because I'm sure the FBI was not an easy gig starting out when you did.
When I interviewed at Arizona State University, they heard my story and they loved it. Because, as Chantel alluded to, they could tell I had grit. I mean, I grew up with rattlesnakes, and
Yeah.
I rode my bicycle down an old cow lane, and I saw a rattlesnake just was coiled, and it struck at me, and I thought, and my bike flipped, and I woke up. I mean, I didn't pass out, but when I really got my senses, I had all these pricks all over me, and I thought, oh my God, I have been bitten by a rattlesnake multiple times, and it's like a 2-hour ride to the hospital because it was a remote ranch. And then I realized I'd fallen into some cactus. And so I knew then when I saw the snake trying to get out of my tire what had happened, and so I got a rock and made sure that particular rattlesnake never terrorized that cow patch again. Well, that started it. So I did have my parents, I had to carry my bike home because I knew, my parents had taught me, you get yourself out of your own situations. It's reliance. But then when I got into the FBI Academy at Quantico, Virginia, it was a whole new level of understanding the meaning of mental toughness, because it was 4 months of constant pressure, constant threat of being thrown out of the academy because you couldn't do enough push-ups or enough sit-ups or run fast enough or shoot well enough or do well enough on your tests. So a great deal of my training, in retrospect, was really developing mental toughness, because you want it. I mean, you had to want it bad enough that you did whatever it took. And if you want a story, I can share a story with you, but I want to cut the interview short. If you have other things you want to talk about.
You know what? Tell us a quick story. Go ahead. We'll rock and roll through this.
Okay, I'll tell a quick story about the mental toughness. So one of the requirements to graduate from the academy was diving off a 25-foot diving board, carrying an M16 into the water, and then swimming to the other side of the pool carrying the weapon. So I had 2 problems. I couldn't swim, and I was afraid of heights.
Whoa.
It was something I had to do. And everybody just watched me, my instructors, my fellow classmates, wondering how I was going to do this. And I tried to think of the positive things, like I was telling Wanda about, the fact that they wouldn't want a lawsuit, that my parents would bring if I drowned, or that I had an expert coach there to save me if I didn't come back up. But you know what? I just did it. And you just don't know what you're capable of doing until you have to do something. And so I took a step. I fell into the water. I bounced back to the top, and I floundered to the other side of the pool with the weapon. It wasn't pretty, but I qualified. So, I mean, that was the type of discomfort zone that really, when you get out, you say, I did something I never thought I could do, and I survived. That gives you confidence.
That's a great story, LaRae, because you know what? It just shows to people who are listening right now, you can do it. You know what I mean? I love that, because it's so true that you just don't know what you're capable of doing. Just do it. You can do it. So, Wanda, I know that you've got a question for LaRae, and I'd love for you to ask that of her right now.
Actually, the question I had already got answered.
Okay. So, all right.
So how about we talk about something else? If you've got if you've got a new entrepreneur that's starting out, because entrepreneurship, you have to be pretty tough. It's like you have to jump a lot of hurdles in order to make things happen, because somebody doesn't tell you you have to do this today. You have to figure out what you have to do today. What would be some great advice that you could offer to a new entrepreneur?
That's a good question, Wanda. I think anybody who's starting out with something new and different, a startup, entrepreneur, they want to find ways that they can predict their success. I mean, isn't that our ultimate goal? And so I say a couple of things to people who are starting out and they're a little unsure of where this is going to end. Number one is stop using the word no. And it has more to do with how our brain reacts, or just as much to do with how our brain reacts as it does to just being positive. Because when we see the word no for less than even a second, our brain starts to produce hormones and neurotransmitters. And these are the transmitters that interfere with the normal functioning of the brain. But when you see the word no, just double that. And it creates even more disruption in the way your brain thinks and moves ahead. So saying and looking and believing in the word no can actually impede your brain's effort to help you succeed. That's number one. And the number two is, again, as we talked about, intentionally choosing to be positive and going out there and looking for the positive aspects of whatever situation there is. I always tell people it's like an investigation. I mean, so you've got this thing in front of you, and you may come at it thinking, okay, this is how I'm going to get this person to confess to this crime. But you can't. It may or may not work that way. But what you do is, so that approach didn't work, you don't give up. You try it from every angle until you work around and you find that soft underbelly. So keeping your attitude positive while you're looking for those alternatives can really be a challenge. And I would say, get yourself a little personal board of directors, somebody whom you can go back to and say, I have tried this and this, I'm not sure, but somebody to help you work your way around that problem until you find a way to overcome it.
Thank you.
Chantel, what do you think of what LaRae just said? That's fantastic ideas. I wish I had that when I started my business, right?
Yes, definitely. I wish I actually, a lot of what LaRae's saying, I wish I knew 20 years ago when I started working. But it's a live and learn process, and it's only going through that you'll become tougher and better. But I did have a question for LaRae. My question is, how can we use mental toughness to predict our success? How can it help us achieve success?
You know, a lot of time when we get into a situation where it's new, or we don't know what that next step is going to look like, we pull back. And for a lot of reasons, which you've already discussed, uncertainty. We are not sure when things are different. And change is hard for a lot of people, and for good reason. Not just because nobody wants, looks forward to failing, but often it's through that failure where you really learn something. I will tell another quick story, if I have time, Chantal, about failing. And I was in the academy again. The academy is just a hotbed of reference for what it takes to really get through some tough times. But I never could do push-ups very well. That was just something I was never very good at. And my coach knew it. And so when it came time for the interim fit test, he was the one to count my push-ups. And he'd start out, and he'd count each one until he got to number 9. And then that push-up, he kept counting to indicate he was not counting it. So it's 9. I did another 9. I did the 9th push-up 9 times before he counted it. And all the time I'm thinking, I'm never going to make 50 push-ups. Never. I mean, all my energy's been wasted on the 9th push-up. I failed that interim fit test by 1 point. I came very close to being washed out of the FBI Academy. And it was at that point, another one of those moments where I had to really ask myself, okay, what did this failure teach me? But that was one of the most important failures of my life, because it brought home to the fact I really did want to be an FBI agent, and that I really would do whatever it took in order to make it happen. So I worked my butt off, and I was in the gym, and I've never loved doing this stuff, but I did what I had to do in order to get where I needed to be. I did graduate. But another thing I would encourage your listeners or your clients is to use a very powerful tool, again, based in neuroscience. It's called visualization. And this is when you visualize your success. So this is what I did with my push-ups. I just envisioned myself going down to the ground to make sure that they would count, and then back up again. And I envisioned myself doing it 50 times, which was, I think, the minimum I had to do, but I would have been happy with just the minimum at that point. But because when you visualize something, your brain does something very interesting. It produces something called dopamine. And dopamine is what's related to rewards. It's a pleasure for you. It's like when you reward yourself, you have warm and good feelings. That's dopamine. So when you see yourself visualizing success, you visualize your success. If you're in front of a group of people and you have to give a talk, visualize how you're going to do it. Visualize how you're going to answer those questions. And your mind can't tell the difference. Your brain can't tell the difference between what you visualize success and real success. It's a very important and powerful mental toughness tool. And the only caveat to that is, I would say, is this. Your brain is smart. There's a big difference between fantasizing and visualizing. So keep it realistic. Your brain knows when you're going too far, and will actually protect you because it doesn't want you to hurt yourself. So you can visualize being a superstar or a rock star or whatever you want, but it has to be realistic because there's a big difference. Your brain can tell the difference.
Okay, we are here with Hot Tips for Biz. We've only got about 4 minutes left of the show, but it's flying by. LaRae, I'm going to kind of switch up my question to you because we've kind of touched on the mindset and how to think positive, you know, and moving forward. Just a real life, you know, example of someone that came to me that started a new position recently, okay? And that, you know what, it's a highly male-dominated industry that she works in. And so she goes in there as a leader, and you know what, she doesn't feel accepted. Basically, people, you know, she's making her feel like she's not wanted there. And so, again, that kind of example of feeling a little bit beaten down, a little less confident than what she needs, what would be your first step with this client to get her mentally tough to move through this, you know, difficult transition? She wants to do the right thing, but that initial feedback from people is that, you know what, you're not welcome here. You know what I mean? So what would you advise or help? How would you help this lady?
I have been in a situation very similar. And I felt like I always worked around great guys, but most of them were men. And not all of them. I remember one of the first squads I was on, I was assigned to go with a senior agent on a child kidnapping case. And I remember the walls were thin. Got up, walked into the supervisor's office, and said, I don't want one of them with me, meaning a female. And my supervisor said, well, get used to it because they are here to stay, meaning women in the FBI, right? So I understood the hostility that some of the guys felt. And I understood a lot of it came from the fact that, you know, there's a lot of testosterone in law enforcement. And they were afraid, I think, at times that I would not be able to physically handle my end of the deal. And what I did is I decided to focus. This is what I did. I created a hit list. I found 4 men on my squad who were the superstars. They were the ones who got the best cases and buddied up to a supervisor and, you know, bossed me around. So I decided I would learn as best I could from those 4. I was determined to turn them into my allies. Because if I could, I would get any case I wanted assigned to me. And so I went to them. I went to them for advice. I put my ego way on the back burner. I would run something by them. Basically, as I recruited spies to work for the U.S. government, I recruited those 4 guys to work for me in promoting me to that supervisor when it came to the case law. But it was on a one-by-one basis. And if I waited until a meeting when I was with everybody to try to do this, it's too late. So right. I did a lot of talking out in the halls. I came up later, and I whatever would work, that is the approach I took.
That's awesome, LaRae. You know, some initial great thoughts. LaRae, you know, this interview could be an hour long. How can people get in touch with you? What is the best way to learn more about you, get your resources?
Thank you. Go to my website, LaRae Kwai, snag.com. I would love to connect with you on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Pinterest, either of those. So and actually there aren't any other LaRae Quais on the internet. So I'm pretty lucky that way, but just put in my name and find me. I'd love to see each of them again.
Fabulous, LaRae. Thank you so much for this great interview. Thank you so much. Chantel, I want to thank you for being an awesome guest host today. And to Wanda, my fabulous co-host, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us off for the day.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for another wonderful show. Thank you, LaRae, for all your words of wisdom to share with our audience. Chantal, thank you so much for overcoming not having internet at home and trying to still be on the show. And, of course, thank you, Cynthia, for being so awesome and keeping us on track with time. We'll be here again next Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Hot Tips for Biz. So please join us. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, LaRae. Thank you, Chantel.
Thank you.